It started with a post that didn't look like much at first glance. No press release, no official statement. Just a short, sharp message from 6ix9ine suggesting that what's been happening to Drake and Lil Durk isn't random at all, that it's some form of punishment tied to how they've spoken about him in the past. Within minutes, that idea stopped being just a comment and started turning into a full-blown debate across social media. Because listen, the timing is what made people stop scrolling. Drake has been in and out of public tension cycles for years, but he usually stays above direct internet interpretation games. Lil Durk, on the other hand, has been moving through a completely different pressure system. Legal issues, industry alliances, and real-life losses that already put him under constant scrutiny. Now suddenly both names are being pulled into a narrative where their past words towards 6ix9ine are being re-examined, like they triggered something bigger. And then there's 6ix9ine himself, a figure who has built a career out of turning attention into conflict and conflict into headlines. According to reports and online reactions, the moment his message started spreading, people immediately began digging up old interviews, diss clips, and social media moments where disrespect or tension was exchanged. Nothing new was actually said by Drake or Lil Durk in response, but that didn't matter. The internet filled the silence with interpretation. Here's where it gets strange. Some users started claiming this wasn't about music anymore. They started framing it like a moral consequence narrative, like actions, words, and public disrespect are somehow looping back in real time. Nothing confirmed, nothing verified. But the idea caught fire fast because it connects emotion, ego, and celebrity history in a way people instinctively react to. And now the conversation isn't just about what was said. It's about whether words in hip-hop carry weight beyond the moment they're spoken, and whether certain public conflicts ever actually disappear, or just wait to resurface when attention hits the right trigger. The moment 6ix9ine dropped that message suggesting something deeper was happening around Drake and Lil Durk, the conversation didn't build slowly, it snapped into motion instantly. People didn't wait for clarification, and there wasn't any official response to anchor the narrative either. So the internet did what it always does in situations like this. It filled the silence with interpretation, memory, and context pulled from years of past tension between all three names. At the center of it is 6ix9ine, a figure who has spent years turning controversy into visibility. Every move he makes online is already viewed through that lens, whether people agree with him or not. So when he suggested that Drake and Lil Durk might be facing some form of consequence tied to past disrespect, it didn't land as a random opinion. It landed like a trigger being pulled on old conversations that were never fully resolved in public. Drake's name immediately brought a different kind of attention to the situation. He doesn't usually respond directly to online theories, and he rarely engages in public back and forth in a direct way anymore. But his history in hip-hop, especially the way he has been mentioned or challenged in different eras of rap, means his name automatically pulls in layers of context. Fans started revisiting old moments, not because anything new happened, but because the narrative invited them to look backward for meaning. Then Lil Durk enters the conversation, and the tone shifts again. Durk's position in the industry is tied heavily to real-life experience, loss, and street-connected storytelling that often overlaps with his music. That makes any suggestion of punishment or consequence feel heavier to audiences, even when nothing is confirmed. According to online reactions, people immediately started connecting older interviews, lyrics, and public moments where Durk or his circle had referenced tension in the industry. But again, nothing in the present moment confirms any real-world escalation tied to 6ix9ine's claim. Here's the thing, the timeline of this entire situation is extremely thin on facts and heavy on interpretation. There was no major announcement, no verified incident, no official response from either Drake or Lil Durk addressing the statement directly at the time the conversation exploded. What existed instead was a single post, amplified by reaction accounts, repost pages, and commentary channels that turned a short message into a wide-reaching debate about meaning, intent, and consequences in hip-hop culture. And once that amplification starts, the narrative stops belonging to the original statement. It becomes something else entirely. People begin inserting their own understanding of past beefs, public appearances, and interviews into the current moment. Even unrelated clips start circulating again, not because they are new, but because they can be reinterpreted under the current conversation. Social media reaction played a huge role in pushing this forward. Some users treated 6ix9ine's statement as trolling, pointing out his history of provocative online behavior. Others took it more seriously, suggesting that even if the wording is exaggerated, there might be underlying tension or unresolved issues being hinted at. Neither side had additional evidence, but both perspectives started shaping the way the discussion evolved. What made it spread even faster was the lack of immediate pushback from the people involved. No direct clarification from Drake, no immediate dismissal from Lil Durk. That silence, whether intentional or not, created space for speculation to expand. In today's environment, silence doesn't pause a story, it accelerates it. People start treating absence of response as part of the message, even when it may have nothing to do with it. According to reports and online commentary, some fans also started framing the situation in a more symbolic way, suggesting it reflects the idea of karma or consequences in entertainment culture. Not as a confirmed reality, but as a narrative lens people apply when celebrity conflicts resurface. That interpretation gained traction because it connects emotional storytelling with real public figures, even without any factual backbone. At this stage, what's actually confirmed is very limited. There is a statement from 6ix9ine that sparked widespread discussion. There is no verified response from Drake or Lil Durk addressing the claim directly. And there is no official indication that anything beyond online commentary is taking place. Everything else surrounding it is built from interpretation, repetition, and reaction cycles that grow stronger the longer the conversation continues without clarification. Once the post started spreading across platforms, the conversation didn't stay contained to 6ix9ine alone. It immediately pulled in fan bases from multiple directions, and that's when the energy shifted from curiosity to debate. People weren't just reading the statement anymore, they were reacting to what they believed it implied. And in hip-hop culture, implication often travels faster than fact. On one side, some users dismissed the entire thing as another attention cycle. They pointed out 6ix9ine's history of making provocative claims and stirring reactions online. From that perspective, the idea of linking Drake and Lil Durk to any form of punishment was seen as a classic engagement move, a way to pull major names into his orbit without any real evidence behind it. But even that dismissal didn't stop the conversation. It actually added fuel, because disagreement online keeps a topic alive just as much as belief does. On the other side, people started treating the statement more symbolically. Not as literal punishment, but as a reflection of how past actions, public words, and industry tension sometimes circle back in unexpected ways. That interpretation led to deeper digging. Old interviews resurfaced, past diss moments were clipped and reposted, even unrelated comments from years ago were recontextualized under this new lens. Nothing new happened, but everything old suddenly felt relevant again. According to online discussions, this is where the first wave of contradictions started showing up. Some accounts claim there was more context behind 6ix9ine's statement, suggesting it was tied to ongoing industry friction that hasn't been publicly detailed. Others strongly pushed back, saying there is no verified link between his post and any real-world development involving Drake or Lil Durk. Both narratives circulated at the same time, creating confusion that spread faster than clarification. Here's where it gets strange. Instead of the conversation narrowing down, it expanded. People began connecting unrelated industry moments, trying to build a timeline that explains why 6ix9ine would say something like that at this specific moment. Some pointed to recent activity around all three artists. Others focused on long-term history, going back years to find possible triggers or unresolved tension, but none of it came with confirmation. It was all interpretation stacked on interpretation. Social media reaction accounts played a major role in amplifying the situation. Short clips, reaction videos, and reposted screenshots started circulating with increasingly bold captions. Some framed it as industry tension resurfacing, while others leaned into entertainment and irony. The framing changed depending on who was posting, but the core message remained the same. People were trying to make sense of a statement that didn't come with explanation. Meanwhile, Drake's and Lil Durk's silence became part of the conversation itself. In situations like this, absence of response doesn't end speculation, it extends it. Some users interpreted the lack of immediate reaction as a sign that the statement wasn't worth addressing. Others saw it differently, suggesting that high-profile figures often avoid responding to online narratives unless absolutely necessary. Neither interpretation could be confirmed, but both kept the discussion active. Check this out. Even unrelated industry posts started getting pulled into the narrative. A comment here, an old interview there. A reposted clip from months ago suddenly reappeared with new meaning attached to it. That's how quickly context shifts when attention locks onto specific names. The original meaning of those moments doesn't change, but the way people interpret them does. According to reports and online commentary, some users began framing the entire situation as part of a broader pattern in hip-hop, where online statements trigger waves of reinterpretation around major artists. Not as a proven fact, but as a recurring behavior pattern fans believe they've observed over time. That belief alone was enough to keep the conversation moving. At this stage, the contradiction is clear. There is no verified event connecting Drake or Lil Durk to any consequence beyond the online statement itself. There is no official clarification expanding on what 6ix9ine meant, but there is a massive volume of interpretation, reaction, and recycled history filling in every gap left by silence. And that combination is what keeps the story from settling, turning a single post into an ongoing discussion that refuses to resolve. As the conversation kept expanding, the focus slowly shifted away from the original post and into something much broader. What started as a single statement from 6ix9ine turned into a full-scale online breakdown of past conflicts, industry relationships, and perceived consequences in hip-hop. And once that shift happened, the story stopped being about what was actually said, and started becoming about what people thought it represented. According to reports and online reactions, one of the biggest drivers of escalation was how quickly different communities began layering meaning onto the same message. Drake's fanbase approached it one way, Lil Durk's audience another, and 6ix9ine's presence in the middle acted like a spark that kept both sides engaged. Each group brought their own history into the interpretation, which meant the same sentence was being read in completely different ways, depending on who was reading it. Some users started treating the statement like a symbolic warning, suggesting it reflected the idea that actions in the industry eventually come back in unexpected ways. Others pushed back hard, saying that framing real artists and real careers in that kind of narrative crosses into overinterpretation. But even that disagreement didn't slow the discussion down. It made it louder, because every counterpoint created another layer of response. Here's where it gets even more layered. Old tensions that had nothing to do with the present moment started resurfacing. Past interviews where Drake was mentioned in competitive contexts were clipped and reposted. Moments where Lil Durk referenced loyalty, pressure, or industry struggles were pulled back into circulation. Even unrelated comments from 6ix9ine's history were reattached to the current narrative, as if everything was part of one continuous thread. Nothing new was actually being revealed, but everything old was being reframed. Social media commentary accounts played a major role in accelerating this. Short reaction videos, edited clips, and quote posts started circulating with increasing intensity. The framing often depended on the platform. Some posts leaned into drama, others leaned into humor, and some tried to present it as serious analysis. But across all of them, the core effect was the same, keeping attention locked on the situation, even without new information. According to online discussions, there was also a noticeable rise in speculative mapping of relationships between the artists involved. People began drawing informal diagrams of influence, past collaborations, and perceived conflicts, not based on verified data, but on memory, interpretation, and fragments of past public interactions. That kind of mapping gave the illusion of structure, even when the foundation underneath it was incomplete. At the same time, silence from Drake and Lil Durk continued to fuel interpretation. In the absence of direct response, people began assigning meaning to that silence. Some interpreted it as indifference. Others saw it as strategy. Neither explanation was confirmed, but both became part of the ongoing conversation. And once silence becomes part of the narrative, it's no longer absence, it becomes material. Check this out. Even timing started becoming a talking point. Users began analyzing when the statement was posted, how quickly it spread, and which accounts amplified it first. That led to theories about coordination, visibility, and attention cycles. None of these theories were supported by verified evidence, but they added another dimension to how people were engaging with the story. Meanwhile, the idea of punishment mentioned in the original post started getting reframed in multiple ways. Some people treated it literally, which led to immediate pushback. Others interpreted it as metaphorical, linking it to reputation, public perception, or industry consequences. That split in interpretation kept the debate alive because there was no single agreed meaning to anchor the discussion. According to reports and commentary online, the situation also highlighted how quickly hip-hop discourse can transform a simple statement into a multi-layer narrative. One post becomes a trigger, but what follows is shaped by history, emotion, and community interpretation rather than new factual developments. That's why the conversation kept growing even without updates from the people directly involved. At this stage, what stands out is not any confirmed action or response, but the scale of reinterpretation happening around a single idea. Every new repost adds another angle. Every reaction adds another layer, and every silence adds another question. The result is a narrative that continues expanding outward, even though the core facts remain unchanged. At this point, the conversation reaches its peak not because anything new has officially happened, but because the interpretation cycle has fully taken over the narrative. What started as a single statement from 6ix9ine has now turned into a layered debate about meaning, intent, and consequences inside hip-hop culture. And the longer it sits without clarification from the main figures involved, the more the discussion expands in every direction at once. According to online reactions and commentary, one of the biggest turning points was how people stopped treating the statement as isolated. Instead, they began linking it to broader ideas about fame, conflict, and accountability in the music industry. That shift changed the tone completely. It was no longer just about whether Drake or Lil Durk were being directly referenced in a serious way. It became about whether public actions in hip-hop carry hidden consequences that fans try to decode after the fact. Here's where it gets strange. The silence from Drake and Lil Durk continued, and instead of reducing speculation, it intensified it. Some users started analyzing past patterns, suggesting that major artists often avoid responding to smaller viral narratives unless they reach a certain threshold. Others argued that silence itself is being overread, and that not every online claim requires a response. But in the absence of confirmation, both interpretations started existing side by side, feeding the same discussion from different angles. Meanwhile, 6ix9ine's original statement kept circulating in edited forms. Short clips, screenshots, and reposted captions stripped it further from its original context, turning it into something more symbolic than literal in the eyes of many viewers. Some people treated it like a warning about industry energy, while others saw it as standard online provocation designed to spark engagement. Neither framing could be verified, but both shaped how the story continued to evolve. According to reports and online analysis, another layer that added pressure to the discussion was the speed at which unrelated historical moments were pulled back into circulation. Old interviews, past disagreements, and previously settled conversations were suddenly being discussed again as if they were connected to the current moment. That created a feeling of continuity where none was officially confirmed. It gave structure to speculation, even without evidence to support it. At the same time, commentary accounts and reaction pages continued pushing the narrative forward. Each new post added another interpretation, often building on the last one rather than introducing something new. That created a feedback loop where engagement became the driving force, not information. And once that loop fully formed, the original statement stopped being the focus. The reaction to it became the story itself. Check this out, even the idea of meaning started shifting. Some users began treating the situation as a case study in how hip-hop narratives form in real time. Others rejected that entirely, insisting that the discussion was being inflated beyond what was actually said. But both sides were still engaging with the same core content, just from different perspectives. That tension kept the conversation active without needing any additional developments. There was also a noticeable change in how uncertainty was being handled. Instead of waiting for clarification, users started building frameworks to explain the silence, the timing, and the spread of the statement. Some framed it as coincidence, others as pattern recognition, but none of these frameworks were confirmed by any official source. They existed entirely within interpretation, yet they carried enough weight online to shape perception. According to online commentary, this kind of situation highlights how quickly modern hip-hop discourse can detach from original context. A single statement becomes the starting point, but what follows is shaped by repetition, memory, and community reaction rather than verified facts. And as more people enter the conversation, the original meaning becomes harder to separate from the layers built around it. At this stage, what remains is not a clear resolution, but an expanding field of interpretation. There is still no confirmed explanation from Drake or Lil Durk addressing the claim directly. There is still no additional context from 6ix9ine beyond the original message. And there is still no verified connection between the statement and any real-world consequence. What exists instead is a continuously growing discussion shaped by silence, repetition, and audience interpretation, still open, still unresolved, and still moving forward through attention alone. Right now, there's no clean ending to this, and that's exactly why people are still locked in on it. One post turned into a full debate, and the longer the silence continues from the main names involved, the more theories keep stacking on top of each other. Make sure you subscribe, stay tuned, and keep up with the channel, because situations like this don't usually stay at this level for long. Either something gets clarified, or something bigger comes out that changes the direction completely. Now the real question is simple: do you think this was just 6ix9ine stirring the pot for attention, or is there actually a deeper industry tension that people are only now starting to notice?